appreciate the symbolism. People who want to silence me have taped their mouths, I guess, that's to communicate their intentions. This is the third time I think I've spoken at USC this decade. Or maybe it's longer. I've gotten to a point in life where I can never remember the time. And each time, my welcome has been the same, which is courageous college Republicans welcome me, and then there's David Horowitz, go away, we can't handle the truth. And the tendency is to look on this as comical. I believe you call the protesters snowflakes. But actually it's quite sinister. First of all, it's going on campuses across the country. First, the left purged faculties like USC's of conservatives. Conservative on this faculty is as rare as a unicorn. Then they purged the conservative texts from the reading lists. And so this is now a campaign when the odd speaker comes in, whatever it is, 3 or 4 a year, that's too much too, has to be suppressed. And this is part of a global movement. And the global movement is engineered by the 57 Islamic states to make criticism of their political agendas blasphemy and to outlaw it. There's resolutions to that effect at the UN. There's a little pamphlet here that everybody can take for free, which describes this movement. Sometimes it's called PC in this country. They have now trigger warnings and microaggressions. It's all the same thing, which is to demonize anybody who disagrees with them and silence them. It's an assault on individual freedom. If you don't have free speech, and free speech is useless if you're doing it in a prison cell or you're doing it in a quarantined environment where I assume most of the people here are the ones who didn't come to protest are college Republicans. So the wider campus will not hear my talk or Ben Shapiro's or Milo Yiannopoulos. What they will do is they will, if there's any public presence for it, they will read the Daily Trojan, a pack of lies and slanders. And you should know the Trojan has gotten a lawyer's letter, and so has the author of that article, Lida Datani, because it's libelous. It's just defamatory. The agenda is, though, to make you an unperson. I don't know if you read about communism anymore in college, but that's what the Soviets did. It makes you an unperson. You disappear. You're not part of the dialogue. Now, I know leftists would get upset if I describe them as what they are, which is fascists, because they communists they're comfortable with, but fascists not. But the difference between communists and fascists is the same difference as that between Sunni jihadists and Shia jihadists. They hate each other, but their agendas are the same. And the agenda begins with silencing individual freedom. That's what terror is about. It's to intimidate people. Why there's a whole, the terrorists who blew up the airport in Brussels came from a Muslim neighborhood. You think people in the neighborhood didn't know what was going on? One reason they didn't report it and save the lives of those people. Same thing in San Bernardino. You think the Muslim community didn't know? It was a bomb factory they were building. The mother was in the bomb factory. The mosque is notorious for sponsoring terrorism. Why don't people speak up? Well, one is they are sympathizers, and the other is they're terrified. So this is a very sinister movement. And you have to ask yourself, why do they want to suppress somebody who disagrees with them? Why do they take such pains to defame them, to slander them, to make up lies about them? Well, the answer is that is the only way that they can sustain the lives that feed them. And I give you an example from this defamatory article in the paper. I think I can remember. She said I was a racist because, and these are her words, I refuted the prevalence of institutional racism. Now, maybe she doesn't understand the English language. If I refuted the idea that there is institutional racism, then there isn't. However, what she really means is that I have said that it's a fiction. Since you can't find the public, we have actually purged racists from our public discourse. Nobody. There's no public figure. Well, I mean, there's David Duke. But you can't get a following if you're an overt racist. You just sort of disappear from you're used as a stick to beat other people with, but you're eliminated effectively. Institutional racism is a fiction because how is there institutional racism at universities, which are all run by liberals anyway, and where millions of dollars are being spent to recruit minorities and special regulations are imposed to protect anybody who can identify as a minority, except, of course, white males, Christians, and so forth. She attacks me for saying, I'll be finished with this in a second, but it's really important. I said that apparently opportunities are not available to some members of the black community that are available to other members of the black community. And the point was this. The left, one of its big lies is that people are oppressed in America. Nobody is oppressed in America except children who chose the wrong parents. Everybody is free. Everybody can leave if they want to leave. The fact of the matter is, Haitians risked their lives to get here. If we open our borders the way the left wants us to do, there would be a flood of Africans and Asians and Hispanics. Well, there is already a flood of Hispanics to come here. Why do they come here? To be oppressed? It's ridiculous. So what I try to point out is you have the black middle class is now larger than the black class in poverty. How is it that those blacks are able to take advantage? If you're a gangbanger in Compton, you can wind up a multi-millionaire or a centimillionaire like Snoop Doggy Dogg. So what's the oppression? There is none. But I'm a racist for saying that. Now, what people who say there's institutional racism that are holding blacks down, they have contempt for law-abiding blacks, for blacks who succeed, absolute contempt for them. Well, they're invisible to them. Anybody who's looked carefully at this problem, for example, the problem of black poverty, knows that a key to it is the lack of family formation. Don't have fathers in the home. 75%, actually 80% in the inner cities of black children are born into a single-parent family. The mother has to take care of the children, and if she can get a job, actually Obama said this, if you are born into a single-parent family, you're 5 times more likely to be poor than a child in another family, regardless of race. This is a truth that the left wants to suppress. That's as simple as that, because they can't argue with it. I'll give you another one. What's the big lie that the Democrats run there? Well, Hillary's campaign, but Bernie also would have it. It's the gender wage gap. And president of this club got in some trouble for inviting Milo Yiannopoulos, who's going around the country enraging feminists who never hear the other side of the argument by saying there is no gender wage gap. I can prove it to you in one sentence that there is no gender wage gap. The gender wage gap is supposed, if it were true that women earn 21 cents less on the dollar than men for the same jobs with the same skills, then employers, smart ones, would fire all their male employees, hire women, and increase their profits 21%, which is a lot, not a little. It doesn't happen. And it doesn't happen because the gender wage gap is a big lie. Now, I came here to talk about the genocidal war that is being waged by people, by Hamas and Fatah, who are in alliance to destroy the Jewish state, that is genocide in itself, and to kill the Jews. It's very open. Iran, the difference between the Islamic fanatics, Jew haters, and Hitler is that Hitler hid the final solution, and the Iranians and Hezbollah shouted from the rooftops. That's the difference. And the whole Muslim world accepts it. And if you think it doesn't, show me the, well, I was actually told tonight, there is one Muslim country out of 57 that has dissociated or dissociated itself from the Iranian call to wipe Israel and America from the face of the earth, and that's the Philippines, which makes me happy because my granddaughter is Filipino. There are 4 lies that feed Jew hatred, and that Students for Justice in Palestine, which it was created by a member of the Muslim Brotherhood, and the Muslim Students Association, I believe it's the MSU on this campus, which is also a creature of the Muslim Brotherhood, which is the fountainhead of terrorism, the Muslim Brotherhood. And these groups carry out propaganda for it. And they do it with 4 lies. The first, the most important, and the biggest lie is that Israel occupies Arab land. Actually, they say it occupies Palestinian land. Palestinian people were invented in 1964 by the KGB and Nasser. These are all easily ascertainable facts. Until 1964, and here's the proof of it. Israel was created in 48. There was a war. When the war was over, Jordan annexed the West Bank, annexed Palestine, and Egypt annexed Gaza. There was not a peep out of the Arab world or the so-called Palestinians for the next 17 years, 16 years, about the erasure of Palestine, because there was no Palestine. All they were concerned about was destroying the Zionist entity, that is, Israel. Anybody who says that anti-Zionism is not Jew hatred is talking through their hats. If there was only one black country in the world, if there was only one Muslim country in the world, and the national movement of that country was denounced and attacked, the way the Jewish national movement is attacked and denounced, you know what the reaction would be, particularly of leftists. There is not 1 inch of Israel that is occupied Arab land. You can go up on Wikipedia, go up any history book to show you. This is the so-called Palestine Mandate. This is now Jordan, and this is Israel. The West Bank is somewhere here. I'm not really good at geography, but there it is. It was created out of the Turkish Empire. The Turks had the bad judgment to side with the Germans in the First World War, and they lost. When you lose a war, the victorious powers take your territory. So the Ottoman Empire, the Turkish Empire, was dissolved, and the following states were created: Israel, Jordan, Lebanon, Syria, and Iraq. All created out of the Turkish Empire. All created in the same way. Palestine is not an Arab word even. Anybody know what? It's Latin. Because when the Romans, when the Jews had a very bad judgment to revolt against the Roman Empire, I believe it was 70 AD, am I right? Something like that, 69, 70 AD. When the Romans beat them, killed 1 million Jews, they renamed Judea and Samaria, which is the West Bank, which is the home of the Jews. They're the indigenous people of Judea and Samaria, going back like 3,000 years, which is 2,000, I don't know, it's 2,500 years before the Arabs ever got there by conquest. They renamed it Philistia. It was the plain of Philistia. They named it after the Philistines, who were Greek. They were Aegean sailors, redheads, not Arabs. That's where the word Palestine comes from. There was no Palestine national movement for the 400 years of the Turkish Empire, and there was none even after the creation of Israel. Israel was attacked by the Arab states, and actually it was a Muslim, it was a jihad, what we see today in Iraq and Syria. It was a jihad against the Jews, spawned by the Muslim Brotherhood, which also spawned Al-Qaeda and Hamas. So the Palestine Mandate was a geographical region. It didn't refer to any national. But all the Arabs speak the same language. They have the same religion and culture. Well, actually, they had several religions, but the others they're just being exterminated. There's a genocide against Christians in the Middle East that the Muslims are conducting. And by the way, in this brain-dead article attacking me, its only purpose was to defame me. The author says that I am the godfather of the anti-Muslim movement. I have written 1.5 million words. We have some movement. Can't handle the truth. Can't handle facts. Goodbye and good riddance. I've encountered this on, maybe 50, maybe 100 campuses. These people are brain dead. And I don't know how to get into Palestine is a word, it's like New England. It's a geographical region around Jordan. This was the Palestine Mandate. Actually, this part is much bigger. Because in 1920, the whole of the Palestine Mandate was promised to the Jews. But in 1922, Churchill signed over 80% of it to Jordan. And Israel was like, it was 3 little slivers. One of them was the Negev Desert, which is completely arid, 60% of the, but the 3 little slivers, don't forget, this is 80%, and they split this part. So the West Bank, which is the historic homeland of the Jews, was given to the Arabs. So these 3 little slivers amounted to 10% of the whole, and 0.02% of the entire Arab landmass. But the Arabs, and they have to believe that it was the Islamic Arabs were so xenophobic, if you like, so full of hate for anybody else that was too much. Too much to have the Jews have 3 slivers of land there. And of course it got worse and worse as the Jews developed this land and made the desert bloom. Well, what the Arab states created is nothing. Oil. That's their wealth. Great tragedy. Anyway. So in 1949, well, the first aggression was in 48. In 49, Nasser created the first terrorist groups, the Fayadeen. And actually the daughter of the Egyptian general that ran those terrorists, Noni Darwish, she goes around campuses and she gets worse treatment, much worse than you saw here. Much more disrespect because she's speaking the truth. 70 years of aggression. The problem, the Middle East conflict would be solved if the Arabs stopped and the so-called Palestinians stopped their aggression against the Jews. This is the Gaza Strip. The only reason there are Israeli troops here is because there were Jews who would be murdered if they left. And when they left, they had to take the 8,000 Jews out. And the 8,000 Jews had created a horticulture industry which amounted to 10% of the gross national product. They were law-abiding. They were incredibly productive and creative. When they left, an American Jew, Mortimer Zuckerman, who was the publisher of the U.S. News and World Report, collected $14 million to buy the greenhouses and the irrigation system and to give it to the Arabs, the so-called Palestinians, as a gesture of peace. On the day the Israeli troops left, they had to extricate the 7,000 Jews or 8,000 Jews because they would be murdered. On the day the Israeli troops left, Hamas destroyed the greenhouses and the irrigation systems. That's going to be the fourth lie. The fourth lie is, I had them in the winter, I don't know why I had it in this order, but I'll say it now since I got into it, is that the Palestinians are victims of the Jews. No, they are victims of Hamas and Fatah. They're victims of their leaders, and because they vote for their leaders, it's hard to excuse them. Hard to excuse them. I'm quoted in that stupid article, which is just a slander, as saying that the Palestinians are morally sick. Here's why I said it. The leaders, I can read you the quotes, but the leaders of Hamas, which is now all of Palestine because the Fatah is in an alliance with them, and Abbas has said almost similar things, like a free Palestine will be Jew-free. They speak like Nazis. The Jews are headed for oblivion. The Hamas Charter. In the Hamas Charter is a hadith, a saying of the Prophet Muhammad. There is no other religion in the world that has a prophet like this. The day of redemption will only come when Muslims fight the Jews and kill them. When the Jews hide behind the rocks and the trees, and the rocks and the trees cry out, "O Muslim, there's a Jew hiding behind me, come and kill him." That was on the USC website, and probably still is, put up there by the Muslim Students Union. I had it taken down once to the outcry of SJP and MSA across the country that this was religious persecution. What kind of a religion for 1,000 years preserves as holy writ a statement like that? There is none. You cannot compare Islam to Christianity or Judaism or Hinduism. The leaders and prophets of these religions were not murderers like Muhammad, who committed a genocide, by the way, against Jews, the Jews of the Quraysh tribe. So the Palestinians are victims of themselves. What I said in this article was, leftists will defend the most heinous acts, like embracing Nazis, which is what the Palestinian people have done. They vote 100% for terrorists, 100% for people who are calling for the extermination of the Jews, who teach kindergartners to hate Jews and want to kill them. 100% of Palestinians vote for it. And a leftist, if anyone's brave enough to listen to an argument and try to answer it, or bright enough, you know which it is, they will say, well, they're oppressed. And what I said in my speech, to conclude that they were morally sick, is that for thousands of years people have been oppressed, but never in the history of mankind has there been a people that has strapped bombs onto their own children, told them to kill Jews and Jewish children, and if they were lucky enough to be males, they would go to heaven and get 72 virgins. I said that's sick, and it is. I don't make any apologies for that. The other two big lies. One is that Israel is an apartheid state. Why is it an apartheid state? It's the only state in the Middle East that is not a racist apartheid state. You name me one other. You can't, if you're a Jew, you can't even enter countries like Saudi Arabia in the Middle East. If you're a Christian and carry a Bible in, they throw you in jail. No Christian can set foot in Mecca or Medina. And I could go on and on. Every minority, including gays, are persecuted in the Arab countries. But in Israel, there are 1 million Muslims living in Israel as citizens who have more rights than the Muslims of any Muslim country. They sit on the Supreme Court. A Miss Israel was an Arab, and so forth and so on. It's just a very, very big lie that they use because the South African government was brought down because it was an apartheid system, or it actually was an apartheid system. And so they're hoping to tar Israel as an apartheid country so they can destroy it. What was the fourth? I gotta. Oh, the final lie is that the Palestinians want a state. No, they don't. This is about the Muslim Islamic jihad. They want an ummah. They want to be part of a caliphate. They want to be part of an Islamic empire. How do we know this? Well, in 1948, they were given all of this and that, and they rejected it. Jordan is 80% Palestinian Arab. That is, Arabs who live around the Jordan or within the mandate. 70%. There has never been a movement for self-determination. Well, where's the movement for self-determination in Jordan, which is ruled by a Hashemite minority? There is none. When Clinton and Barack, Ehud Barak, gave 95% of the land the Palestinians were demanding, or 97%, depending on what you read, it was rejected. And actually, Arafat once said, we're not going to accept a Palestinian state because then the struggle would be over. Anyway, enough of this. Much more serious, I don't know what's more serious than that. This is not about the Jews. The Jews are just the canaries in the mine. The Jews are first. The Christians are already being, well, many more Christians have been slaughtered by these Islamic, I call them Islamic Nazis, because extermination is part of their program. Part of their program. And I guess I need to repeat this. Of course, there are decent, law-abiding Muslims. Although I have to qualify the decency, it depends on how they treat their women and gays. Because, as you probably know, women have very few rights in the Islamic world, and they're treated like chattel. There are a few feminists who protest the Islamic treatment of women, but most feminists, like most leftists, will make apologies for anything so long as it's anti-American. How many Muslims support the terrorist jihad against the West? Well, you can read the surveys. And actually, we have a website at discoverthenetworks.org, which is an encyclopedia of the left. And I had my guy who does it put together the surveys. You'll see it's somewhere between 30 and 40% of Muslims support the war against the rest of us. Well, there is 1,500 million, 1.5 billion Muslims. So you can do the math of 30 or 40, that's over 500 to 600 or 700 million people that hate us. On religious grounds, they hate us. And unfortunately, we're in this election year when all of our putative leaders are busy attacking each other and discrediting themselves. It's really terrible. Very depressing. I find it very depressing. Now, I want to get away from the Islamic Jihad and talk about one which now is much closer to home. A generation of leftists, actually from my generation of leftists, I guess you know my background. My parents were communists. No, my parents were communists. I was one of the founders of the New Left. I stayed in the left until the mid-'70s when the Black Panther Party murdered my friend, and the whole left defended them. She was a mother of 3 children. She was just brutally murdered. And I was close enough to Huey Newton and the Black Panther leaders that I wrote about this in a book called Radical Son. I discovered that they had killed murdered more than a dozen people, all black, who didn't have much. They didn't have people to stand up for them, so they got away with it, and they got away with all the murders. It's my radical generation, and now your professors, and they have so twisted the historical reality that you have so-called civil rights leaders talking about America as a white supremacist country. Anybody who uses the term white supremacy to describe America is a racist, an anti-white racist. The President of the United States has said that racism is in the DNA of America. Here's the truth. And again, I learned this by reading the books of Orlando Patterson, who is a sociologist in the Black Studies Department at Harvard. And he was not a conservative. Slavery existed in the world for 3,000 years before anybody said it was immoral. The first people to say it was immoral were white male Christians in England, Wilberforce, and the people around him. The truth about America is that America, of course, it inherited a slave system from England, but in its birth document, in the Declaration of Independence, it declared all men are created equal in the eyes of God, and that you can't take away their rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And within 70 years, slavery was destroyed in this country at enormous cost. 350,000 Union soldiers gave their lives to rid this country of slavery. The British had to send gunboats into Africa to liberate the slaves from the African slave owners. It's a myth that the Europeans went into Africa and threw nets over Kunta Kinte. Anybody know that name? No. Well, they're redoing roots. That's a myth. What they did is they went to the slave markets and they bought them from African kings. Nobody has clean hands as far as slavery is concerned, but America liberated the whole hemisphere from slavery, except for Haiti, which was liberated by Toussaint Louverture, a black revolutionary. That's the reality. Why isn't that being taught in the school? How many people know this? This is USC. I'll bet you didn't learn it in class.
Did actually.
You did? Great. What history course?
No, writing course.
A writing course. Oh. Well, somebody snuck in there. Yeah. What the myth of America having racism in its DNA does is it deprives African Americans who made enormous. Our culture would not be an American culture without the contributions of African Americans. Robs them of their dignity in being Americans. The left is evil. It's an evil political formation. It is totalitarian in its intent. And I'm going to finish this by explaining to you why they need the lies. Why do they lie so much? Conservatives look at the past as a clue to how human beings behave and what's possible or practical. They're very real-world oriented. Leftists are oriented by a fantasy about the future. There's going to be a future in which there's social justice. There's not going to be any prejudice. There won't be any racism, sexism, homophobia. Baloney. Who in his right mind would even think that? There is no such place, and there never will be. The problem, and this is why religious people have an advantage over secular people, is because it's all there in Genesis. What is the problem? Who creates the social problems? Why is the world so messed up? It's us. It's individuals. It's human pride and human lust and human deceit and human greed. That's what it's about. But these people have this fantasy where there's going to be perfect equality. And since it runs totally against human nature, people aren't equal. I mean, anybody think that they could play basketball as well as LeBron James? Anybody think they're as smarter than Bill Gates or Mark Zuckerberg? Come on. Everybody knows there's just inequality all around us. People have different energy. If you have a lot of energy, you can get pretty far. If you're a beautiful person, money will come to you and opportunities. Or even if you just have a sunny personality. It's the way the world works. This fantasy, however, these people are believers. The left is a crypto religion, modeled on Christianity, by the way. The world is a fallen place. There's going to be a redemption. We are the redeemers. That's why they're so arrogant, and that's why they're so dangerous. They see themselves as the army of the saints, and they see you as the party of the devil. And that's the way they treat you. Contempt, arrogance, viciousness, character assassination. It's always character assassination. And we have the so-called liberals of this university, as every other, colluding with them. I mean, I was told coming in here, and I see we did get some campus security. I don't know how we got that. I thank them for that. But students here were told not to put my ad in the paper because then they would have to have security or something like that. And the college Republicans would have to pay for the security. The left creates the problem, and we have to pay to solve it. So that, to me, that's the way I see the world that we live in, and why I'm so passionate. I'm in the process of publishing 9 volumes called The Black Book of the American Left, which is about it's all my writings and my experience with the left. I learned it the very, very hard way when I saw innocent people killed by the Black Panther Party, mainly black, and no justice for them. And that was because they mouthed these progressive values, and they were socialists, progressives, and we're going to redeem the rest of us. I've spoken way too long. Thank you for listening. Yeah, I'm going to take questions also. I've handed out this pamphlet. This pamphlet is about the assault on individual freedom that's been led to suppress opinions that the Islamic Conference doesn't like, and the support for that suppression by the Democratic Party in the United States. That's what this is about. Anyway, I'll take questions.
We'll take 4 questions because we need to be out of the room.
Vacate the room.
Vacate the room by 9 o'clock, so we don't want to go.
Yes, sir.
So why, in your opinion, if you look at history, especially like recent history, some of the great peoples have always used the Jewish people as like a scapegoat. Nazis.
How can I explain the oldest hatred? I can't.
Yeah.
It's beyond me. Japan is an anti-Semitic country. There are no Jews there. The Poles killed all the Jews with the Germans, threw rocks into the ghettos, and they're anti-Semitic. I don't get it. Not all Poles, obviously.
Yeah, I was going to ask, why, in your opinion, is it that group that's always targeted by these sort of...
Well, let me give you 2 versions, okay? One of them is not a little, it's a lot critical of the Jews. Well, I'll just give that one. Not to blame the victim, mind you, not to blame the victim, but the Jews came along and it was a polytheistic world. All people worship many gods. Well, I hope you still read the Greeks and the Romans, so you know what I'm talking about. And the Jews came along and said, there's only one God, and he's our God. That will get people mad. And then the Jews also, they keep kosher. I mean, we have so many deracinated Jews now. But the Jews kept kosher laws. It's what kept them together, by the way. It's what allowed them to survive. When the Romans destroyed their homeland, the Jews had to live as aliens in other societies for 1,000 years. And what keeping kosher and keeping the laws made them survive. The Jews have survived every people that's attacked them. But it has its bad side too. People don't like you if you're to yourself and standoffish. Mormons are persecuted in that, except in the state of Utah, in that way. The other thing is that Christians, there was a really interesting book called The Jewish Mystique, which I don't think it's way out of print probably, but you might find it on Amazon. Christians, if you were the brightest son, you went to the priesthood, where you were celibate. Rabbis, it's a mitzvah, it's a blessing for them to have children. So the smart Jews multiplied, and the smart Christians had their, genetic line destroyed over time. So Jews are, I don't have to go through this, but, they're off the charts and winning Nobel Prizes and inventions, and Israel is, probably all of the little electronic instruments you use probably had some origin in Israel. Well, what drives hatred in this world is envy and resentment. That's what drives the left. So I think all of that is part of it, but it's just an historic fact. It's amazing to me. I was alive when, probably the Academy Awards went to Exodus. There hasn't been a movie celebrating the Jewish achievement in Israel since then that I know of. Maybe not a big movie, and yet Hollywood, Jews are a dominant presence in Hollywood, as everybody knows. The conservatives in Hollywood are Italian. So, yes, sir.
Presidential candidates, most notably Donald Trump, was criticized for suggesting that he wanted to negotiate a peace deal between Israel and Palestine. Do you think that it's naive of him to suggest that? Or do you think
it's a mistake that every president has made.
So you don't think it's possible?
No, and I think that the Israelis bear a responsibility for this. Why is there a so-called peace process? How can you negotiate with people who want to kill you? You can't. They're terrorists. They're Nazis. They want to exterminate the Jews, push them into the sea. How can you negotiate with them? How can you get a? You can't. But Israel, how can an American president, maybe there will be one, say you can't negotiate with the Palestinians when the Israeli leaders say you can? Although I see Netanyahu is changing his tune on that. Why didn't Israel pull out of the peace negotiations when Hamas and Fatah, signed a unity agreement? Anyway, there are reasons, but they're not good ones. Yes, sir.
I always find it very interesting that the left and everything that they stand for seems to be a direct odds with many policies within the Islamic world.
No. Because the left will embrace anybody that hates us.
That's my question.
As a one-time leftist, I made the left a kind of life study, I guess. When the United States, when Saddam Hussein, a monster of the 20th, a real monster of the 20th century, swallowed Kuwait, I wanted to see if the left would support Saddam, and they did. Why were there 1 million leftists out in the street when Bush went after Saddam? Saddam was in violation. Bush the first. No, that's the first one. Then the second one. Why in 2002, when Bush said to Saddam, you have to obey the Security Council resolutions that will prevent you from developing nuclear and chemical weapons, why did the left go into the streets? 1 million. Now, they would never tell you they thought Saddam was a good guy. But they hate America. Hate it. You've got to understand that. And they hate you because you oppose them. Why are they so rude? Why would they, these people, they're idiots. This article, defaming me. Why would the Trojan editors go along with that? If you had any decency as an editor, you'd say, what's your evidence for this? Or you'd look at that statement, I refuted institutional racism, therefore I'm a racist. Man? Yes.
So, kind of along the veins of talking about free speech. So, the student protesters claim that many of the things that you say personally harm their ability to learn on campus because it's hateful speech. So what do you say to that?
Bullshit. And if they had any, if that were serious, they would be trying to answer what I have to say. What offends them? That I said the prevalence, I refuted the prevalence of institutional racism? Let me say, professors should not be defended by free speech in the classroom. You are a generation that has, I mean, I know that you have some good professors. When I went to college, I was a Marxist. I was never singled out for being a Marxist by my professors. And I never knew what their politics were. And if students took one side of a question, the professors would argue the other side. Because their professional obligation is to teach students how to think, not to tell them what to think. And this is enshrined in the most famous academic freedom statement by the AAUP before it became a Stalinist organization. In 1915, you can read, actually, I've written 5 books on this subject. You can read any one. One of them is a little one called Indoctrination U, won't tax you that much. And actually, you just read the first chapter. But any professor who hectors you or shapes his course to get a political result is violating his professional code, but nobody's enforcing it. There is not a university in America that enforces that. The best schools, let me tell you, that I went to are very unlikely schools. One was Kenyon and the other was Reed. In the catalog, Reed boasts that 80% of its students are leftists. However, they have very traditional courses, and they teach in a traditional manner, not to indoctrinate, but to actually teach. I was amazed at both schools when I was there for that reason. I think a terrible thing has happened in our country. The school system is now an indoctrination system for the Democratic Party and the far left. That's what it is, with exceptions, no question. And there are departments that are better than others. Obviously, the business school and all the physics and any hard science, but also political science departments are generally pretty good because they're real world oriented. You have to find out what people actually think and deal with human reality. It's going to be a good department. Anybody we missed? Yes, sir.
I'm wondering what your, I guess, evidence or sources are in terms of the connections between MSUs and MSAs around college campuses and radical Islamic.
I'll write this website. As part of my mission, I have created a website called, I know you don't have to do that, Discover the Networks. .org. You go up there, there's a search engine, type in Muslim Students Association. There's actually, I will give you in brief, there was a trial in 2005 of the Holy Land Foundation, which was the largest Muslim charity in America and was a funding agency for Hamas. And they were tried and convicted. And the FBI, in the course of their investigation, uncovered a Muslim Brotherhood document about its plans. I forget the exact words, but I think it was to destroy the American civilization by creating institutions within the American framework. And the Muslim Students Association was one of those institutions. CARE is another. It's all there on Discover the Networks. Anybody else? Well, thank you all for being a great audience.